Well, welcome, everybody. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We start with an invocation, which we observe with a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Corliss.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Morales.
Here.
Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Here.
Willits.
Here.
All present.
And now we've got minutes to approve from February 27th.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the minutes of the 9:30 a.m. and noon meetings on Tuesday, February 27th, 2024.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk?
Willits.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And now we have the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Clerk?
Willits.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
We've got one ordinance on first reading.
I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on first reading be read by number and title only and filed for the second reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD-8-24, an ordinance, CAR 22-33, for property located at 703 Americana Boulevard, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from MX5 to MX5DA, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Thank you. We are now going to move into new business. We've got two public hearings. One's a subdivision. I should be using my guide that tells me who's coming. And then the second is a modification to a development agreement. With the subdivision, welcome, David. We've got David from PDS, of course, and then Stephanie Hopkins. Are you representing the, great, okay. And so what I'll do, we don't expect the neighborhood association or the public to be here. Is that correct? Raise your hand if you're here to speak on this one. Anybody online? All right, after staff's report, I'll see if you're in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council. The applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat for a residential subdivision comprised of two buildable lots located at 10881 West Florence Drive on 2.94 acres in an R2 DDA zone. And as you can see from the aerial photograph, the area is comprised of residential neighborhoods of varying densities. This includes multifamily development and manufactured home community to the northwest and southwest, and adjacent to the south and east are detached single-family neighborhoods. In summary, on January 4th, 2021, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved a planned unit development containing 7 multifamily buildings for a total of 40 dwelling units, 25 of which were dedicated as affordable. The project was to be developed in 2 phases. The first phase was completed, which included the construction of 5 multifamily buildings for a total of 28 of the 28 units and a clubhouse and playground on the east side of the site. In addition, a 33-foot wide service drive, which connects Florence Drive, located to the northwest corner of the site, and Irving Court to the south, was constructed with public street standards. The second phase included a subdivision application, which is before you now, to dedicate that 33-foot wide service drive as public street, Bonsai Street, to create 2 buildable parcels. Once the subdivision is recorded, the remaining 12 building lots can be constructed on the west parcel. In conclusion, the proposed subdivision complies is in compliance with the comprehensive plan and complies all the requirements of the development code, and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm very familiar with this area of town. I just want to make sure that I have some clarity in terms of what the buildings will be. Are these townhomes that it will be? I know it said multifamily, but I'm curious.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Willetts, they are multifamily buildings. So there were, I think there were 5 multifamily buildings proposed for 40. A number of them were built on the first phase and already on site on the east half. And then I think two more multifamily buildings were making up the remaining 12 units were built on the second phase on the west side. But they're not townhomes, they're multifamily.
And then one more follow-up. I was really interested in this area, obviously, because we bought property off Shamrock. And I'm just wondering about just the connections there to that park. It's not yet built, obviously, but we are looking at trying to help folks have a 10-minute walk from there.
This, Madam Mayor, members of the council, the project will actually connect the 2 public streets of Irving Court and
Yeah, David, will you go back to the drawing
Sure.
so that we can see that? And if I remember correctly, that was part of the discussion years ago when we first saw this the first time, was that connection piece.
So I think it connects Florence Drive and Irving Court through the site north-south. And then it does connect off to the public right of way off to the east, but through a service drive. But then it goes through you can see the multifamily component and then ties back into that new public street. So it does connect those multiple public right of ways that connect into the property.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, David, yeah, that makes sense. Looking at the drawing now, I think that when this came up originally in 2021, that was some of the discussion, is trying to figure out like how we can make sure that there's connectivity through it. I guess my question is, it just the application seems like weird or out of order to me. Is it common that we see a subdivision get approved after like some of the construction's already happened? Is it because it's in the 2 different phases? I'm just trying to figure out why it came in front of us before and now it's coming in front of us again.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, when this was initially done, it was done in 2 phases. And the first phase kept it as one giant parcel and had that street connection come through, but as a service drive, with the intention that phase 2 would dedicate it as a public street. There was a bit of I think there were a bit of a rush initially to get this approved because of federal funding for the affordable housing. So we were trying to work with them, and this phasing seemed to work on their budgeting and their timing to get that federal funding.
Perfect. Thank you for that reminder. I was trying to figure out why we didn't do both of these things at once, and that was why we were trying to get things moving a little bit faster. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll ask the applicant, are you Connor Lindstrom? Right now I have this sheet. Welcome. Are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? All right. Are there any further questions for the applicant? Want to confirm that nobody is here to testify on this? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of SUB 23-43 preliminary plat for residential subdivision located at 10881 West Florence Drive on 2.94 acres in an R2D DA zone.
Second.
We have a motion and Councilmember Willetts is second. Discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
I appreciate the affordable aspect of the 25 affordable units dedicated to affordability. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the developer mitigating the tree removal with new trees there. I know that the trees that were removed were undesirable, but I appreciate the new trees that went in. So I think that this is a great project and happy to see it moving forward.
Madam Mayor, a couple comments. Thank you. This is a great development. It's going to connect a lot of areas in our city in the West, and we need more housing out there. It's a great place to live. Love West Boise. Thanks for building.
Great. All right, clerk, will you call the roll?
Willetts,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you and have a great evening. Okay, next up we have CR 23-22. Jesse Lyle is presenting. Jesse's going to be online. There you are. And then we have the applicant. I see that the applicant has raised their hands. Will you just check in? We've got Betty Berman Solo. You're representing the neighborhood? Oh, okay, great. All right. So Marissa Keith is online. Wonderful. Is anybody else here to testify on this item? Okay, great. So we'll hear from staff online, then we'll hear from the applicant, I think also online. Then we'll hear from, this has not happened like this in a while, the neighborhood association online, and then I will open it up for the member of the public that has joined us this evening, and then see if anybody else is online. With that, Jesse, welcome.
Thank you. Give me 1 second to get my screen to cooperate here. All right, can everybody see that?
No,
Nope. Okay.
we can see it reflecting in your glasses, but we can't see it on the screen.
Let's try this again.
Yep, now we've got it.
All right. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Item for you is CAR 23-22. This is a modification to a development agreement to allow for residential and expanded commercial uses on 0.54 acres in a C2D DA zone located at 12548 Overland Road. The subject property was rezoned in 2004 with a comprehensive land use change to the current C2D DA zone and the commercial land use designation. The existing outdoor storage use was in place at the time of the rezone, and the DA was put in place to limit the uses on site to similar uses as what was existing. The applicant proposes to modify the existing DA to allow for residential uses as allowed by the zone, as well as expanded commercial uses allowed within the base zoning district. In January of 2024, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved a PUD that includes 156 multifamily units and 6,000 square feet of commercial space. The mixed-use nature of the project will provide a transition from the commercial uses at the intersection of Cloverdale and Overland to the east, and the lower density residential uses to the north, south, and west. There was a comment received today with concerns about lack of cross-access or secondary emergency access. However, this was not a topic of discussion at the planning and zoning meeting, and there were no agency comments received addressing this concern. So in conclusion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval of the DA modification, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Madam Mayor, Jesse, thank you. In the documentation that we received as part of, oh, yep, thank you. Jesse, as part of the documentation that we received as part of this item, the Planning and Zoning Commission looked at some of the access points, particularly some of the pathways, and there was a comment made that it wasn't within their jurisdiction to ask for more. I think the quote was that might be a bridge too far. Can you talk to us about what our options are for enhancing the connectivity of this rezone, or excuse me, of this development agreement?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the Planning and Zoning Commission did look at additional pathway connections specifically, but because the applicant had already provided the required 2 amenities for the PUD, they did not feel it was in their purview to condition above and beyond that. I can say about vehicle access, in that project report, there was some discussion about how the property to the west is in Ada County, and so cross access could be required. However, we couldn't guarantee that any development on that parcel would actually comply with our requirement for cross access. However, if that is something that the council would like to add to the DA, there is an option to modify the DA with that tonight.
Jesse, can you bring that map up so we can visualize it? Because this is right on the edge of our city, and I want to see what's Ada County and what's Meridian.
Sure thing. Let me see if I can figure out the share again.
You're doing great.
So this is the subject parcel here. I can turn on the zoning layer so you can see it's right at the edge of the city. The parcel directly to the west is Ada County, and then Meridian is farther to the west. Then there is additional commercial along Overland at this corner. But given the primarily residential nature of this specific development, the planning team did not believe that cross access would be the most helpful in this situation.
Jesse, can you tell us the section that is Ada County that is right adjacent to the? You cannot hear me? Okay.
It would be this parcel here, the 4330
Yeah.
Overland.
What is that zoned for in Ada County? And you can ask a friend or take, I mean,
I think I can pull that up if we give me just 1 second here. There's other zoning layer somewhere.
you're good.
BRUT, which is some kind of residential. I don't know exactly what that is for Ada County.
Okay. And then I just need a little bit more clarification on the path, because we have Ada County, then it goes to Meridian. If we required a path, was the concern that it may not be adjacent to what we would require because they might have different requirements? Help clarify that a little bit about that concern.
Sure, Madam Mayor, council members, are you speaking about the pathway condition that would be
Yes.
along the
Yep.
north side?
Yep,
Okay,
you got it.
thank you for the clarification. Sure, so Meridian does have a pathway plan that does call out a pathway on along this canal. The condition for that pathway was to require an easement for the near future. So when the exact location for that pathway on the Meridian plan was determined, then it could be put into place at that point in time. But the easement with this application would be just to reserve that area until we know the final location of that pathway.
Madam Mayor, so just to be clear, the easement is reserved in case there would be a future pathway there, but we wouldn't be requiring the developer to pay for the construction of a pathway that we don't know what it would look like quite yet.
Madam Mayor, council members, that is how the condition reads currently. I believe that there was some talk in the commission meeting about having a temporary pathway, maybe a gravel pathway, until that full build out was completed.
Yep, and following up there, just one more thing. I think that there's kind of two things going on with that pathway. One, that there's the Rinbach Canal that has the access drive next to it, but then there's also 5 Mile Creek that's sort of in between them. The pathway easement that's here, is it on the south side of 5 Mile Creek or is it on the other side of 5 Mile Creek?
Would be on the south side of 5 Mile Creek or the north side of that property,
Thank you.
shown in red here.
Is there a condition for the gravel pathway at this point?
Madam Mayor, council members, that was not a condition. It was just something that was referred to as a desire from the commission at that meeting.
Great, thanks.
Madam Mayor, I have a question for Jesse. Jesse, one of the comments that we received was in regards to like fire access. Do you know if did the fire department weigh in on this? Apologies if that was in the packet. Did they have a perspective? Is this within their means to service?
Madam Mayor, council members, I do believe that fire comments were received, but there was no mention of requiring a secondary access for a project of this size.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jesse. And now we have the applicant. JD Planning and Consulting.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
My name is Jory Delgado. I'm with JD Planning and Consulting. We also have another team member, Wade Thomas, online as well. We do not wish to present any new material at this meeting. Jesse has done a great job of presenting this project for us and reiterating everything that planning and zoning had discussed in their hearing in all of our documents. So we stand for any questions from the council or the public.
Thank you. Yeah,
Madam
I think
Mayor,
we've got a couple.
Madam Mayor, Jory, I just wanted to ask about the thought process on, or maybe why, if there was a thought process or why there wasn't, for trying to build in some sort of connection between the pathway to the north and then the multi-use pathway on Overland, which would provide direct access to that bus stop in the corner. Were there conversations about that?
Go ahead. Oh, it sounds like. Is that raised hand? Is that to answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I
I'm
think
gonna
Jory,
ask.
I
okay.
apologize. This is Wade Thomas for the applicant, and I think Jory is having troubles being muted as well.
Great. Okay. Yeah. It's hard. We can't. It's hard for us to unmute two people at once.
Yeah, my apologies.
I'm going to ask that you stay on now to answer as many questions as you can. And if you can't and Jory needs to come back, then we'll pick those up at the end. Sound good?
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay. So you're answering Councilmember Morales's question.
Yes, Councilmember Morales. Actually, that issue came up at planning and zoning, and that was something that they felt like they could not require. We're actually going to design review in the next couple of weeks, and we're going to propose that. We're looking at on the east and west sides of the site, kind of creating, the concept was basically to create a path, connect the path to the top and the bottom along Overland. So basically you could kind of go for a jog, I guess, for lack of a better word. So yes, that is something, and if that's a condition that we want to put into the DA, we would not have any objections to that at all. Additionally, on the item, Madam Mayor, on the item of the path, we actually have a path in the landscape plan. We're planning on doing something more than just gravel and actually paving that. Obviously, there's some risk on future connectivity. The issue on the west side is those parcels on the west side of the site are actually in Meridian's area of impact. And if you look closely, there's one that's maybe 20 yards wide. We had hoped to maybe include that in the project, but Meridian did not express any desire to release those properties out of their area of impact. And so that was just not explored.
Madam Mayor, thank you for providing that feedback, because I do think that would be a huge win. I love the multifamily along a corridor where you have transit. I love that you've built in that connection to that transit piece there in the bottom right corner there. And so just thinking future proof, anyone that comes onto this property by way of that pathway that may not already be here, being able to have that access without having to traipse through the parking lot would be really, really good. So thank you for thinking of that and bringing that forward.
And then, Madam Mayor, if it's okay, I think it was Councilmember Willits that brought up the secondary access, if that's correct. The secondary access, we had initially designed in secondary access with 2 entrances. However, ACHD required that we only provide 1 access into the site, and it had to do with connectivity on and off of Overland, as well as proximity to the major corridor to the east of the site.
Madam Mayor, Wade, this is Councilmember Willits. I want to get some clarity on what you just said. So
Okay.
you said that was available in the plan. ACHD said it was not required, but that you were willing to do that.
Initially, yes. And we actually modified the design based on ACHD policy and their requirements as well. And fire had no objections to the access that we provided.
So further clarity, are you comfortable with adding additional fire access?
I am. I think it would be in violation of ACHD policy, though.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It actually kind of aesthetically, I guess, felt better from a design perspective to actually have two entrances as opposed to kind of squeezing it all into the middle of the site. But ultimately, that's where ACHD landed on that issue.
Okay, so for clarification, and I can see that because I like symmetry. It felt better. It looked better. But at the end of the day, ACHD's guidelines wouldn't have been met. So you had to create a different access point that would relate to their code.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. One more question, Wade. We obviously are very interested in the pathway, and one of the things that I thought was really well designed in this particular development was the fact that folks could eventually walk to the area that is by the freeway, the Top Golf. There's that's becoming a more commercial area, obviously. So I'm very interested in how we do that, and secondarily, it's really scary to walk on Overland for a long time. I mean, this is a major thoroughfare in our metro area. So if we were to condition that path, what kind of language would you suggest for that, given that you've already looked at doing it for design review?
I think I would actually suggest that the appropriate question for the applicant is, would he be in agreement or opposed to a condition that requires a path? And then we'll look to our team for that language.
Got it. Would you be opposed to a path?
No, I wouldn't. And actually, we had planned it in. I'm actually working on a development that's just to the west of this site. It's in between. It actually touches Rolling Hills. And I know the city of Meridian is pushing on that particular site to have a path installed along 5 Mile Creek, just to the south of 5 Mile Creek. So really the only gap is that parcel that's in the middle. I think the issue with that particular parcel is ACHD is requiring an extension of Movado Way up through that site. And it takes about half that site away. And I want to say it's about a 4 to 4.5 acre site. So I think the developability, if that's a word, of that particular site is probably questionable at this time. But if you're asking me in 10 years, yeah, I think that connectivity will go all the way through Rolling Hills. Rolling Hills, if you touch that, gives you the pathway up to the Top Golf Complex.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Hi, Wade. This is Kathy Corliss. When we were talking about the pathways, I know we were talking about the, I believe that's the north side of the property, but you had mentioned you guys were talking about also maybe connecting pathways on the east and west, kind of on the outside of the perimeter. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right now on the parking area, there's no, between where the parking is on the east and west sides of the project, there's no, there's enough space there that we could add some type of pathway. That may be no more than kind of widened sidewalks, but we will explore that, more open to that as a condition.
Madam Mayor, I would strongly encourage that with the number of units that are in that development, 156. And in my mind, I think about the number of kids that are going to be in there and the number of dogs and pets, and to have more of a pathway, because Overland right there is very, very busy. Even if you walk down to Cloverdale, it's very busy. So if you can have these smaller pathways where people can go exercise, take their dogs out, are strongly encouraged. Thank you for considering that.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have a question, and it's more just out of curiosity. I think that there's maybe 4 buildings identified as housing. Looks like one orange building that's maybe commercial, and then another kind of white building next to that. What's the plan for the, what do you, I guess, envision for that commercial space and the white building next to that commercial space?
Thank you, Councilmember Halliburton. So to clarify, the building that has the commercial actually consists of the first floor, and it's about 10,000 square feet. 6,000 of that will be some type of what I would deem retail space. Sorry for the air quotes. And then about 4,000 in amenities. You know, when you design a project like this, it's always kind of questionable as to what retail type operations will go into a site like this. So that particular building also includes residential on the 3 floors above the commercial, just to clarify that. You know, if you go to Meridian right now, they've got the whole mixed use downtown area, and to be candid, a lot of that's empty. So, we're kind of envisioning there's an opportunity here for probably something like a coffee shop, a place for people to kind of come and gather. I personally think there's a really good opportunity for maybe a medical type complex where you have a chiropractor, a dentist, a potential doctor's office, those types of things. When you get into other type of more traditional retail space, as an operator, it becomes really difficult to find long-term tenants. So you end up kind of cycling through the TIs on a fairly frequent basis. But I think those types of tenants, obviously, if let's take the medical aspect of it, you've got, 154 doors at this site. That's a lot of potential clients. So that's kind of what I would envision, but it is designed to have the flexibility to take that 6,000 square feet and be built out in a number of different configurations.
Great. I appreciate that clarification. I didn't realize that there was actually going to be housing above it, so that's really good to hear as well. In kind of creating that flexible space. Certainly, this is a part of town that could use some easier places for people to walk or ride their bicycle to. And so, if there's something that can serve the folks in that housing complex, that would be wonderful. But yeah, thank you.
All right, Wade, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Looks like we're good for now. I'll come back to you and Jory for closeouts at the end.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Is Marissa Keith on now? Great. Welcome, Marissa.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. Hi, this is Marissa Keith. I am with the Southwest Ada County Alliance Neighborhood Association at 3279 South Cloverdale in Boise. And hold on. I had to set my dogs out. The Neighborhood Association is not opposed to this development. We do have some concerns that we would like to see addressed. And one of those is the fact that since there is no secondary access to the complex, that some sort of cross-access agreement be provided. Ideally to the east and west, but I would say if I had to choose, at least to the west. And the reason being is, as the applicant said, the highway district wants to put Movado across Overland into that other parcel. And then it looks like they also want to have it take a left and connect with Eastview Circle, which would then connect to Rolling Hill Drive. And that road has a potential that there could be a stoplight there. It also goes up into that top golf facility. So that would give people in the future two options to enter and exit this project. And of course, that would mean that all of these small pastures to the west would have to be conditioned that way as well. But that is something that if the cross-access agreement is already there with this project, it is much easier to get that working with the county and then potentially the city of Meridian. So the Neighborhood Association probably will just keep an eye on that, follow up as needed when those parcels do go before those other governments. And then I think our other ask is that, if we can get the pathway finished and ready to go at the time of development, that always is a win. And again, that will just make it easier if the parcel next to it goes for a development application. We could say there's already this pathway, it's already built. We just want to see the connection to continue. I think that is all I have. So any questions?
Thanks, Marissa. Ooh. All right. Now we will go to the public. Ms. Berman Solo, welcome. It has been a long time. Really good to see you.
Same here. My name is Betty Berman Solo. I live at 1970 Canonero Way, Boise. It's about half a mile from this location, but Quail Run fronts Overland. Good evening. I really am concerned about what happens to Overland. I mean, I believe you all got the email that I sent earlier. It is our gateway, and we'd like to see it as livable as possible. And having a project like this take place with the density at this level is a concern. And I really do feel that two accesses or one access to start with onto Overland is inadequate. I'm not an engineer, but I do feel that there was a mistake made here in securing across access to the west. I know that the highway district is very concerned about the increased level of accidents. We have whatever 156 units is going to generate in terms of trips. They're all expected to go out onto that one access. And I think that's inadequate, especially if there was a fire. And I think I've seen so many attempts now to take infill parcels and make sure that connectivity is paramount, especially if you have an option, even going to the east. There could be a breakaway fire access, but I'd like to see something that is more than a pathway in the event that when that is developed, that you have something concrete. Right now, without anything conditioning, requiring a second emergency access of some kind, this parcel to me represents a safety issue that could be repeated as we go down Overland Road, and I think it's a mistake. I've had an accident at the Dairy Queen, people trying to get to that center from Albertsons. So there's no connectivity between Albertsons and Dairy Queen at Overland and 5 Mile. And that has been a lingering concern that we develop Overland with that in mind as things move forward. I feel with what we have in place in terms of a promise that I would prefer to see 3-story buildings there, floors, rather than the 4, just because of the lack of connectivity.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else here to testify on this? Nobody else online? Alrighty. Are there? Oh, I forgot. I was looking for our PDS staff, Jesse. I forgot that Jesse was online. So I want to see if there's any questions for staff.
Madam Mayor, I think I've got a question.
Okay.
And we maybe have gone over this a little bit already. Oh yeah, they're not here. They're online. Like, where did they go? There's these questions about this cross-access agreement, and I'm looking at it, and I guess I just don't see how it's going to work. 5 Mile Creek runs right along the back edge and all the way over to what looks like a street called View Circle. So really, in order to get cross-access over there, you'd also be building a bridge or tiling over 5 Mile Creek. It looks to me like that would be the only street you would be connecting to would be View Circle, if you could get through that second 2 more lots. Is that correct?
We're working to unmute Jesse.
Oh. Her hand's raised.
Yeah, she's not unmuted yet.
Thank you. I think that we are all a little bit out of practice with the full virtual here. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, Councilor Halliburton. I didn't quite catch your full question.
Yeah, it was a bad question. So people are asking about a cross-access agreement to the west. There's, an unincorporated or a we've got an Ada County lot, but really the only street I feel like we could connect to over to would be View Circle. But in order to do that, we would be going over 5 Mile Creek to get there. So I'm just trying to figure out what would we actually be trying to connect to if we were going to do a cross-access agreement to the west. I don't see any connections there.
Madam Mayor, council members, I think that the idea is that once that larger parcel, I can share again. Once this larger parcel redevelops, there might be some potential for cross-access here. I think is the idea. However, again, this is something that we did look at a little bit, and because it's in Meridian's area of impact, it's also land that's in the county currently. The planning team didn't see a whole lot of
Jesse,
super-
sorry to interrupt. So yeah, I agree with that. If you could get another cross access into there, but then it would just have to go back down onto Overland. I think what I hear people saying is trying to get a cross access that goes across that lot, 1, 2, 3, 4 more until you get to Rolling Hill Drive, or across that sort of I guess northwest part right along 5 Mile Creek if you were going to connect to View Circle. And so that seems like that one would have 2 lots. So that would be the one that you would probably most likely be able to do a cross access. I guess I just don't see it being possible to have a cross access to the west unless you went through 1, 2, 3, at least 4 lots to get to Rolling Hills.
Madam Mayor, council members, I mean, that does seem like it would be the most logical place to try to connect, but there are the topographical issues with the canal and also the creek there. I do think that if there was another cross access here, like you said, that the most likely place that this would develop would be going back out onto Overland.
Great, thank you. That was mostly me just thinking out loud, but I do appreciate the clarity there.
Councilmember Willetts?
I'm still processing. Thank you, Mayor. That
Okay.
his question was my question.
Great, okay. Yeah, and I'd say that typically for something like this, I mean, as Jesse pointed out, this is an interesting kind of puzzle next to this lot because it's Meridian area of impact, but it's Ada County right now. And so I appreciate hearing that staff looked at whether or not it was possible, but then looked at the number of lots, as Councilmember Halliburton suggested, that would be required to get at that. I also appreciate that the developer tried to do this all at once. And it's unfortunate that that couldn't work that way.
And Madam Mayor, if I could just follow up. So with the access that we do have shown here, our fire has approved that for fire access? Question mark.
Jesse, will you
No.
confirm that?
Madam Mayor, council members, that is correct. Part of the fire's condition of approval was to make sure that all of the lanes within the complex are aerial apparatus fire lanes. They didn't have any issue with just the single access onto Overland.
Great, thank you.
And now I'm gonna wait. Okay, I'm gonna send it to Wade. I believe you've got 5 minutes to wrap us up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the access issue, I think really the only comments I have are just, deference, I guess, to ACHD on that particular issue, which they did look at, as well as planning and zoning when we went through the PD process on the CUP. On the secondary access, I think I would have to defer to fire on that as well. The only other 2 new items that kind of came up were, I think it was Ms. Berman brought up Overland Drive. I think it's worth stating that we did have to give 62 feet of right of way for the future expansion of Overland, which will eventually be 7 lanes. I can't speak to ACHD, but I don't know if that had some bearing on how they kind of decided access on this particular site. The only other item I wanted to mention was that the 4 stories buildings are compliant with code, and that's all the comments I had. So I'll yield the rest of our time.
Thank you. All right. I am going to close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, can I have a
Oh, you just
Pos-
snuck in. Yes.
Wade?
Yes.
So I am concerned about that secondary access, and it is frustrating that given this situation, we're not able to better plan for another artery. Is there any way within the design to do that without losing parts of the property that could go to housing? Like, what is possible?
So to answer that question, and thank you, Councilwoman. So when you say secondary access, when I hear secondary access, I hear two entrances and exits on Overland.
Oh.
I'm assuming when you say secondary access, it's based on your current comments, it's access, the primary access, let's say from Overland traveling north and south, and some other access going east and west. Is that correct?
You have done an excellent job interpreting. Yes.
Oh, thank
When
you.
Overland is busy, soon to get busier, I guess, now that it's going to be 7 lanes at some point. I'm thinking about how do we provide access that's through other thoroughfares yet to be determined because we've got a couple of different municipalities involved. Is
Sure.
that possible to plan ahead now? Or is this something in 15 years we're going to think, dang, we should have done that?
So to answer the question, I think the answer is, the first one is there are some significant site constraints. So the property line, if you look at page 2 of the report, the property line actually goes into almost to the Reidenbach Canal and includes the creek. So we have those parts of the site that are simply unusable. Additionally, we designed the site to stay out of the floodplain, so we weren't building any buildings. The parking lots do clip some of that, as well as the path that we will build will be in the floodplain. But we felt that those were a lot more, it was a lot easier to mitigate those impacts as opposed to trying to basically put a building back there. And so pulling that entire site, really because of the Reidenbach and the 5 Mile Creek, really crunches those building down. So the short answer is no, I think it has a pretty significant impact on the site. A big part of that is just driven by parking, the parking requirements for a site like this. You know, we ironically spend a ton of time with Republic Services about where we can put trash dumpsters. And so they have a pretty significant say on the design as well. And that creates a lot of design constraints, never mind fire. So I guess the short or long answer to your question is no, I think it would have a significant impact on the site. I was even kind of sitting here as everyone's talking, you know, oh, could we punch through a road here, and I think it would create a lot of issues for the site.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I should have said thanks, Wade. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of CAR 23-22, modification of development agreement at 12584 West Overland on 5.4 acres in a C2D DA zone with the added condition of the required pathway that I would like the applicant to work with staff on. And I'd like we can add in those thoughts maybe in our deliberation, but it's, well, I guess I'll leave it at that and let's
Second.
All right, I'm going to ask. I'll ask for clarification on the motion. There's an approval of the DA with one additional condition that a requirement to build the pathway is included.
Yes.
I want to make sure that in directing the applicant to work with staff, that in the deliberate, it needs to be clear what we expect them to work on.
Yes.
So if staff will take, staff's on Zoom, we're not used to this. I believe it would be best to have it returned to you.
Great.
So if you would direct findings associated with the motion and final approval of the additional condition, and if the seconder would agree, I think that's our best day.
Madam Mayor, clarification before the seconder does seconds again. You've identified the pathway on the north Councilmember Morales also brought up the possibility of sidewalk connections from the multi-use path to the front. The developer volunteered to do that. Are we including that in the
conditions.
pathway? That's probably a different condition.
Yes, I was thinking.
Let's
yeah.
pull that motion off the.
Yep.
Let's pull that motion off the table. I'm just pulling it off the table. And I'll ask that you start again if you intended to have two conditions representing the two separate pathway discussions with the same direction to staff to return with findings and conditions for approval.
Yes, so I know that the applicant voluntarily agreed to pathways. I know that planning and zoning originally started with the north and south, and then also mentioned the east and the west. So ultimately, in my mind, it's a pathway basically around the perimeter of the property. But so for my clarification, the two different motions are for the east and west and the north and south connections. Yes. Okay. So then, Madam Mayor, I move approval of CR 23-22 with the added condition of added two conditions of pathways. The first condition being for east and west connectivity, and the second condition being for north-south connectivity.
With the direction.
With the direction to work with staff on the specifics.
Return with findings.
And return with the findings.
And the additional
and,
conditions.
And the additional conditions.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Oh my goodness. Yes,
I'm
Council President,
still-
go ahead.
I'm still here. I think this would be very consistent with other conditions we've imposed on developments that are nearby here, and conditions that may be imposed on future developments, given feedback I've heard from other developers in that area. So I think this is very consistent with other expectations we've imposed in that same area. And I think the added pathways would be a great benefit to this development.
Thanks. And just before more discussion, I want to read into the record that Council President Nash is here. We typically would ask attendees to have their camera on. However, he is ill, so his camera is off. And so we haven't seen him throughout the hearing. And that was the surprise again when we heard him. But just want to acknowledge his presence and the reason that we cannot see him.
Madam Mayor, just a couple comments here. I think this is a really, really great development. There were some concerns that people talked about Overland being a gateway to their neighborhoods. And I think one of the things that this development does is it puts a really nice multi-use path all along Overland. And that's something that we want to see along the entire stretch. And so as these developments come in, we actually get to put in a really, really nice piece of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure that comes with the development as well. This is consistent with a very, very similar project that we've approved along 5 Mile Creek before in the past, where we did require a dirt pathway in the back, and we required them to make it as accessible as possible. This isn't identified in the pathways master plan, so that might be something that our staff consider in the future, that this isn't actually one of the corridors that's identified. And so I really appreciate the developer going through the extra effort to do this. The north and south pathways, I guess, that are along the east and west border, it makes sense to be doing this right now. They're going to be putting in curbscape. They can extend that curbscape into a wider sidewalk, creating that connection all the way around. And to the concerns about the access to the west, what's probably going to be developed to the west is another multi-unit complex just like this. And so you would have a driveway that went into just another multi-unit complex that would empty out onto Overland as well. If there was a way of extending it all the way to Rolling Hills, I think that would have been a different conversation, but that would have gone through at least 4 different properties and potentially a creek that nobody wants to cover up. So again, I think that this fits within our comprehensive plan. It fits within our zoning, and it helps the city accomplish a lot of those goals that I think will be an asset to the neighborhood. I'm excited to see what the commercial space turns out to be, and I hope that it serves the neighbors well.
Madam Mayor? I just want to provide a couple of comments. One is, in looking at the ACHD master plan report, it does show that Movado coming through across Overland and to their future plans. So it does look like there's some connectivity to the parcel next to it. And this development is very similar to ones we have approved in the past on Overland. I do have a couple of, I guess, maybe cautions for us is looking at, on this particular project, the traffic count was done 3 years prior. And being that Overland is truly a gateway to many subdivisions out here, Overland is going to become very congested very quickly. As we continue to piecemeal and approve these projects, I think we need to encourage the next development to have an updated traffic count plan, because not only is Boise approving these large multifamily apartment complexes on Overland, so is our sister city Meridian right next to us that's feeding a lot of traffic onto there. So I'm very concerned about the congestion that we're going to see on Overland. It gets very busy during key traffic hours, and especially if there's any accidents on the highway. So I think for our next development on there, we want to make sure that we have a fully updated traffic count from ACHD. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, a couple of comments. Thank you, Councilmember Corliss. I think that is an excellent point. Overland is a secondary freeway. For those who don't want to take the freeway, they take Overland. And so we know that it's getting increased use. 2 comments. I'd like to thank the Neighborhood Association and Betsy for coming down, and for the developer for being willing to look at this. There's 2 parts of this that I think are really important. One is, because Overland is such a major thoroughfare, we should have density along it. That density means cars, because we're in West Boise. And I'm hopeful that the next development can look at how we get people through Overland. And I appreciate what Councilmember Corliss said about that. 2, even if we know that cars are going to be used on Overland Road, it doesn't mean people don't want to walk places. And they want to walk places. And they don't want to be honed in by major freeways everywhere they go. So I very much appreciate the path. I think it's really important. It's crucial as we connect to other areas in our sister cities, particularly that major development along the freeway in Meridian. So thank you to the folks that are developing this. I am hopeful that when we have an additional development, or we can talk to Meridian, that we can look at some other thoroughfares through this. I see the reality of it, which is, I don't think we want to lose a couple buildings because of the road and because of where the creek is, which is so magnificent. We don't want to do anything with there, but I am concerned about how much traffic we're putting on Overland. So we need it. This is where the density should be, but I hope that we can be a little bit more deliberate in the future. But I'll be obviously supporting the motion.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I have a couple of comments. First, I also wanted to commend the developer for their willingness to work with us on the pathways aspect of it. And I think that the retail space is great. That encourages the walkability that Councilmember Willits was speaking to. And for the neighborhood's concerns on the additional access points, perhaps something will come down the road on either side. But to add an additional curb cut to that current development plan comes with its own drawbacks. Curb cuts can add, it adds further threat to pedestrians. It's just another access point where pedestrians and cars could connect. And also it backs up traffic, which can then cause fender benders and things like that. So I know that that wasn't our decision in this, but just wanted to kind of point out some of the drawbacks to having another curb cut in that specific area. And I guess from my perspective, if our fire department is saying that they are signing off and they can properly service this parcel, then that's I have trust in those subject matter experts, and we'll take their word on that and trust that they can service that appropriately.
All right. Thank you. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Willits,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Nash.
Yes, sorry, mute.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And I trust that Jesse was able, from the discussion, as well as the developer was able from the discussion to hear the interest and will of the council in working on the conditions that'll be returned to us at the earliest possible time. As Jesse is still there. Great, thanks. Perfect. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.